Welcome to the Coordinated Entry Flowchart demo, presented by the Continuum of Care Partnership to End Homelessness in October of 2020. If you're acquainted with Coordinated Entry and RCOC at all, you recognize this flowchart. You also recognize that it's extremely difficult to see the information in all the boxes in our previous presentations and Zoom talks. I'm going to walk you through what's in all the boxes and what it means. The Westchester County Coordinated Entry Program provides universal services to all people who are experiencing homelessness in Westchester County. Clients or customers use coordinated entry by entering through an access point. These access points include street outreach personnel, local district offices of the Department of Social Services, drop-in shelters, and emergency shelters. At a coordinated entry point of access, a dedicated staff member called the Coordinated Entry Assessor will use our HMIS system to enter the client into the Coordinated Entry project. They will have to complete the Comprehensive Homelessness Assessment Tool, also known as the CHAT, complete the COVID-19 risk assessment, and collect eligibility documentation. This documentation includes documentation of disability, verification and any additional documents toward the time homeless, verification of any U.S. military service, and verification of income or benefits. Please note, at the time this presentation was recorded, we're currently in a COVID-19 state of emergency. The COVID-19 specific assessment is only required during the state of emergency. Based on the CHAT score and length of time the client has been homeless, the housing prioritization list is generated by HMIS, and the Coordinated Entry Administrator maintains that list. The Coordinated Entry Administrator refers the client or household at the top of the prioritization list to an available opening in a COC housing program where the client meets the preliminary eligibility criteria. The appropriateness of housing referrals can vary. On the left side of the slide, we see if the placement's not appropriate, and on the right side, we see what happens if it is. If the placement is not appropriate, the agency will communicate with the Coordinated Entry Administrator and upload an agency referral denial form within 15 days into HMIS. The housing provider will change the referral status in HMIS to show rejected by provider. The client or household returns to the prioritization list for re-referral to a more compatible program, and the next client on the prioritization list who meets the preliminary eligibility criteria for housing is referred. If the placement is appropriate, the Coordinated Entry Assessor coordinates with the housing provider staff to facilitate engagement with the client. Engagement around housing referrals. If the engagement is not successful, if the housing provider is not able to connect with the customer within 10 business days, the housing provider will communicate with the Coordinated Entry Assessor and Coordinated Entry Administrator before uploading an agency referral denial form in HMIS. The Coordinated Entry Assessor must assist the housing provider and client in engagement for the referral. The client's referral status in HMIS would be changed to rejected by provider. The client will either be returned to the prioritization list for re-referral or exited from coordinated entry, depending on the reason for the unsuccessful engagement. Please be aware that the current COVID-19 policy supersedes the coordinated entry policy on denials during the COVID-19 state of emergency. Please check the COVID-19 policy guidelines before denying any client on the basis of not being able to contact them. If the engagement with the client is successful, the client will receive clear information from the housing provider about the program they have been referred to, as well as the expectations of them in the program. Once informed, the client has the right to choose whether to accept the housing opportunity or decline. If the referral is declined by the client, the housing provider will notify the coordinated entry assessor and coordinated entry administrator before uploading a customer referral denial form to HMIS. The housing provider must then change the client's status to rejected by client in HMIS. The client is either returned to the prioritization list for re-referral or exited from coordinated entry, depending on their reason for the denial. If the referral is accepted by the client, the housing provider begins the intake process within 3 business days. The housing provider enters the project start date in HMIS and changes the client's status to accepted. Successful housing placement and moving in. The coordinated entry assessor works with the client and the housing provider to obtain any final eligibility documents within 10 business days after the intake process has been started. The housing provider, with the cooperation of the client and coordinated entry assessor, locates an appropriate housing unit and arranges move-in. Ideally, this would happen in 30 days. However, we are aware of the housing market that we're in. So this is a goal, 30 days. Upon moving in to their brand new unit, the housing provider records the client's move-in date in HMIS and notifies the coordinated entry administrator within 1 business day of the move. That concludes our walkthrough of the coordinated entry flowchart. For more information about coordinated entry policy, processes, and documentation mentioned in this demonstration, please visit our website, wcochomeless.org/coordinated entry. There, you'll find all of the documentation and information required for clients to successfully move through the coordinated entry process and gain housing.